Good morning, everyone. We are now live for our event today. Thank you for joining us for the American Academy of Pediatrics Nevada Chapter Virtual Walk with a Doc Kids Time. I'd like to welcome all of our parents, kids, and fellow practitioners to our June virtual talk. My name is Dr. Lily Hadaji, and I'm a pediatrician here in Las Vegas, as well as the Nevada chapter of the AAP Walk with a Doc coordinator. This month actually marks our 5th anniversary meeting every second Sunday of the month in Las Vegas, so we're really excited. We coordinate kid-friendly talks on a variety of pediatric health topics, and then we enjoy an outdoor walk together. It's a really great way to get outdoors, learn important information about the health of our kids, and have the opportunity to ask a local pediatrician or pediatric specialist any questions. Our chapter also helps coordinate this event for the Reno community. We normally join at the Springs Preserve's outdoor venue most of the year, and during hotter summer months, we gather at Mount Charleston Visitor Gateway to escape the heat. Since we're keeping our distance to protect ourselves and our community from this pandemic, we're holding a virtual walk with a doc this morning, live streamed online. For our talk today, we are really happy to welcome Dr. Terrence McAllister. He is a pediatrician here in Las Vegas at Desert Valley Pediatrics and also the Nevada AAP Secretary and Treasurer. In addition, Dr. McAllister is also the Nevada AAP's gun violence prevention advocate. He started his career as a major in the U.S. Air Force and has been speaking to parents about guns in the home for now about 20 years. As Dr. McAllister starts his talk, I really encourage all of you to use the chat box to talk to each other and ask any questions that he can answer at the conclusion of his talk. Dr. McAllister, we are ready when you are.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. As Dr. Hadaji said, I'm Dr. Terrence McAllister. I'm a primary care pediatrician here in Las Vegas, and I did start my career in the Air Force. I joined the Air Force while I was in medical school and did my training with them and spent 6 years in active duty with the Air Force. Now, while I was in my training back in 2007, I did a research study looking at the attitudes of parents in the military about gun ownership and gun storage at home. The idea behind the research study was to look to see if the attitudes of people who may use guns on a daily basis in their career, or certainly have significant training in the lethality and the use of these weapons, if their attitudes about having the guns in their home might be different than those in the general civilian population. So it's an interesting study, and it did make some interesting findings. About a third of the kids in my survey lived in a home with a gun, and that stands up to national statistics. Most studies that do this show that about a third of kids in this country live in a home that has a gun in it. And many of those are unfortunately not stored safely. It's estimated that about 4.5 million kids live in a home with a gun that is kept loaded and unlocked, and that is an unsafe way to keep your gun. Now, another interesting thing that I learned in the study that I did was that most parents felt it was appropriate for a pediatrician to talk to them about gun safety in the home. And unfortunately, most of the parents in my survey also said a pediatrician had never spoken to them about the safety of having a gun in the home. So I think there's a real disconnect there, which still continues. As pediatricians, we discuss all sorts of safety issues with our families. We discuss how to put your children down to sleep. We discuss safety of car seats and seat belts. We discuss safety around pools and fencing, about heat exposure. So we spend a lot of our time discussing safety and what we call preventative advice, trying to prevent accidents from happening. And so it's an appropriate thing for us as pediatricians to talk to parents and families about safe gun storage. So, when we're talking about guns in the home and the risk associated with them, we look at 3 separate risks that I think are important to consider. The first is the risk of unintentional shootings. Children are naturally curious, and if there's a gun in the home and they find it, they are likely to play with it. This includes very young children who may not know what they're doing and are just exploring a new thing they found, as well as older children. Guns are certainly glamorized in the media in this country, and it's an exciting thing to hold and to play with. And they may or may not realize how dangerous the gun is. In 2020, there were more than 3 accidental shootings of children in this country. So that's a lot. And unfortunately, more than 150 of them were fatal. So about half of them ended up with the child being dead, often killed by another child who was playing with a gun. And so this is important. That's a high number, and that's something that we need to address. So this is why this really is a safety issue in pediatrics. The second risk we consider is suicide. So for children as well as adults, the suicide rate is 4 times higher if you live in a home with a gun. So just having that gun in the home puts everybody at that home at higher risk of suicide, of having a successful suicide. 40% of all suicides in kids involve a gun, so that's almost half of them. And about 9 times out of 10, a child who kills themselves with the gun got the gun in their home. So they're not going out and buying it or getting it from a friend or something else. It's a gun that's already in the home that they're using for the suicide. And excuse me, suicide, especially in children and adolescents, tends to be an impulsive act. So a child is in a position where they think they need to die and they do something to act on that. And unfortunately, if you try to kill yourself with a gun, it's almost always successful. Children who try to kill themselves in other ways with an overdose of medications or other things often have a chance to regret it as soon as they do it and to seek out help and sometimes to get help. But with a gun, that's not the case. And so the risk for suicide really is significantly higher for children if there is a gun in the home. And then the final risk is homicide, is somebody in the home being killed by a gun. So the rate of a homicide is 3 times higher for a person who lives in a home with a gun. A lot of people will purchase a gun or have the gun in their home for what they think are safety reasons, but the numbers really show that even having that gun is a high risk. A lot of this has to do with the risk of domestic violence, of somebody who lives in the home using it against somebody else in the home. But there's also a risk of home invaders taking the weapon away from somebody who has it there and using it against them. And the risk of homicide is a real problem in pediatrics. About 50% of the shooting deaths of children in this country are considered homicide. So they're not suicide or accidental. It's actually somebody trying to kill them. And so the unintentional shootings, the suicide, and the homicide are all risks of having a gun in the home. So what can you do to keep a gun in the home safe? So there are a couple of things to consider. The first rule that's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics is that the safest home for a child to live in is a home that does not have a gun in it. And so anybody who does have a home, does have a gun rather, and a child needs to really consider their reasons for having the gun, and if there's any way that they can keep it someplace outside of the home. Now, if you do determine that you need to keep your gun in the home, then there are safer ways to store it. So the safest way to store a gun is first to store it unloaded, so no ammunition in the gun, and then to keep it locked. The best way is probably in a gun safe, but trigger locks, which are a device that goes over the trigger of a gun that prevents you from being able to pull the trigger, or cable locks, which is a device that runs a metal cable through the barrel of a gun and then locks, and it prevents ammunition from being able to be chambered into the gun, are also very effective at locking a gun. And then the ammunition should also be kept locked, and ideally should be kept locked in a different place than where the gun is kept. So that's the safest way to keep a gun in your home. First, don't have it in your home, and if you do have it, keep it unloaded and locked with the ammunition locked in a separate location. So what about gun safety in somebody else's home? As I said earlier, about 1/3 of kids live in a home with a gun. So if your child is visiting a friend, is on a play date, or is at somebody else's home, there may very well be a gun in that house. And so what do you do about that? Well, the most important thing is really just to ask. So asking before you allow your child to go to somebody's home, asking them if they keep a gun in the home and if it's kept safely. A lot of people can think this is an invasive question to ask somebody, you're invading their privacy. But, when you send your kid to somebody else's home, you would ask other safety questions, right? You ask them about animals in the house, you ask them about allergies, about what kind of food they're going to serve in the house. You ask them if they have a pool and what kind of supervision there'll be. All these things are safety issues for your child, and you're going to ask about them. And so it certainly is appropriate to ask about the safety of any potential guns that are in the house. So, that's my talk. So guns definitely are a safety risk for kids for a number of different reasons. The safest way to keep a gun in your house is to keep it out of the house. And if you do have a gun, you want to keep it unloaded and locked. And those simple measures can help to prevent a lot of tragedies that can occur with guns. All right, well, thank you very much for listening to my talk. And I'm just wondering if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. McAllister. Yes, couple questions for you. The first one being, where can I get a gun lock, or where can someone get a gun lock?
Sure, and that's a good question. And actually, they're not hard to get. You can find them at pretty much any place that sells guns will also sell gun locks, either safes or trigger locks. You can buy them at most sporting goods stores. Places like Dick's Sporting Goods sells trigger locks, as well as gun safes. And you can, of course, buy them on Amazon. You can get anything on Amazon. And they're not all that expensive. A gun safe is relatively expensive, but a trigger lock or a cable lock, you can purchase them anywhere from $10 to $15. There are more expensive locks that you can get. Those that have like fingerprint release are certainly more expensive, but you can get a good safe trigger lock or cable lock for $10 to $15 in a number of different places.
Thank you. Your second question for you, Dr. McAllister, is, are there any local gun safety courses for kids?
Yeah, which is also a good question. So gun safety classes can be problematic. The American Academy of Pediatrics doesn't believe that any child is mature enough to handle a weapon, to handle a gun. And so you should start thinking not about teaching your child how to use a gun, but maybe your adolescent. So think like a driver's license. If they're old enough and mature enough to handle a car, then maybe they're ready to have the maturity to handle a gun. There are some simple safety things that you can teach your child. The most important thing is to teach your child never to touch a gun. If they find a gun, they shouldn't touch it to bring it to anybody. They should leave it right where it is. They should leave the area immediately, and they should tell an adult right away. Those are the most important safety measures for a child to know. So gun safety courses, and a lot of gun safety courses also include how to safely use a firearm. So they include teaching how to load and clean and fire a weapon. And that the American Academy of Pediatrics does not believe is not recommended for any child. But a gun safety class, like hunting classes like that are often held at places like Dick's Sporting Goods, where they do just talk about the safety of firearms and avoiding firearms and don't involve any teaching of how to load or fire a weapon. Those can be safe classes for kids to take.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. McAllister, for that really informative talk on guns in the home and gun safety. There was a lot of important information in there. Thank you, everyone, who has joined us today for participating. We really appreciate everyone's participation. So it's time for us all now to go on our outdoor walk. We'll stop the live feed, and I really encourage everyone to take the time to enjoy some physical activity outside. It would be really great to see any photos of yourselves walking together that could be posted on the Nevada AAP Twitter feed, which is at AAP Nevada. Make sure everyone to take a walk for at least 20 minutes. Bring your water and sunscreen. It is definitely hot outside. Maintain your social distancing still and wear a mask. We are definitely keeping up to date on the latest recommendations from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we'll let you all know when it is safe to resume in-person walks. Please make sure to take your kids 12 and older for their COVID-19 vaccinations. And for kids 12 and under, check with your pediatrician to ensure they are all up to date on their childhood immunizations against vaccine preventable diseases. So our next virtual walk with a doc will be held July 11th at 10 a.m. And we hope to see you all there again. Please stay safe and healthy and have a great walk. Thank you.
Thank you.